Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I saw some people's hearts were moved at that last presentation. I think I can distill our entire mission into 3 words as to how to stop alcohol-impaired driving. It's love one another. That's the entire solution to stop drunk driving in this country. If you love someone, I maintain, you won't hurt them. And if you love yourself, you won't harm yourself or place yourself in harm's way by getting behind the wheel of a car and endangering yourself. And of course, when you endanger yourself, you endanger someone else. There's no guarantees that that's going to happen. I've met people that drove under the influence for a very long time and had no consequences. Then I've met people that had consequences early on when they were young, and then had to live with the consequences for the rest of their life. If you love someone, you won't hurt them. If you love your PowerPoint, it'll work. The other one just simply says, if you love yourself, you won't hurt yourself. Yay! Woohoo! The PowerPoint loves me again. This one, right? Okay, but my drug test comes back clean, so. Yeah, it's good news for MADD, but my drug dealer has some explaining to do. But back to my speech, and no, I don't do drugs. I don't even do legal drugs. I'm kind of weak, you know, so. We forgive, notwithstanding the temperature of our hearts. I might be in MADD, but I'm not mad at anybody. I have no interest in judging others, and I thought I'm hitting the right key here. Yeah, you got the right key. Yay! Ha! All right, well, I'll just go to the next one, man. What can I say? I'm not a professional. Should I stand closer, you think? Okay. I'll switch hands. Ambidextrous, so talk into my left hand, and I'll do this with my right. So we do have an exclusive membership in MADD. Shit Creek Canoe Club survivor, been up and back. And chances are you've avoided membership in this club, and that's a good thing. We want you to keep it that way. When I said I'm in MADD, but I'm not mad at anyone, I think there's another definition for anger or for MADD, and it's grief. People are in grief, and they call it anger. When they've lost a loved one, when they've maybe killed someone themselves, and they're angry at themselves, whatever it might be, the grief is still there. Now, MADD is equipped to help victims of this tragedy, but they're not equipped to help people who have caused the tragedies. Their grief is unremedied. They generally go either into prison or jail. If it's their first offense, they might not do much time, like the person that killed Mary. But he's got to live with it forever. But MADD doesn't afford them any opportunities to work through their grief. And I think that could be a problem for the offender, because if they have unresolved grief, they're going to end up possibly reoffending again. People need to heal. People need to love themselves and forgive themselves when they screw up. And without that, it's almost a certain repetition of the act that undermines that person's life. It's going to happen again and again and again until they get some help or they quit Earth School. They're just done. And MADD has helped me a lot, I can say, but it wasn't always easy being in MADD. Who am I? Who is Timothy Cameron? Well, I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. For me, alcoholism is, when I drink, I break out in handcuffs. That's my allergy. Anyone ever broke out in handcuffs from drinking? I saw a couple of hands go up. Yeah, I've sold my freedom for a drink more times than I can count. And, that's not for me anymore. The first time I attended a MADD panel was in December of '90, so it was about this time 27 years ago when I was contemplating joining MADD by voluntarily attending a panel. I sobered up 3 months before that. So I'll cover the bad old days, transformation, and what I'm like now, a life of living service in Mothers Against Drunk Driving and other organizations. The woman on the left, Mary Jo Robinson, is giving me a 5-year medallion in the back of a recovery house in Stillwater. And I told her it was the second Saturday of the month that we're doing medallions, and she showed up, and some of my friends showed up. The club was closed. I got the wrong date. So we're standing out by a dumpster, and I'm getting my medallion, right? And I edited out the dumpster, which is right behind Mary Jo. But Mary Jo was a woman in MADD who came to speak at our club, right? And when I was sober for 90 days, they had slated her as our recovery speaker. We're going to celebrate, but yet they're going to have a MADD speaker come in and talk to us. And I thought, something isn't making sense here. Why are we going to have some person come in here and ruin our celebration? She's going to talk about losing a loved one, and we're going to hear all this pain and this really uncomfortable story, and she's, I believed, was going to finger point at us and tell us what rotten people we were for driving under the influence, and don't you know you could have killed someone, and I was playing a tape in my head. It was all internal, it wasn't realistic, and I would call that tape contempt prior to investigation, otherwise known as prejudice. I had never heard this woman utter a single word, but I thought I knew what she was going to say prior to her saying it. So it was as good as said in my mind. But imagine my surprise when she introduced herself as Mary Jo Robinson, a grateful recovering alcoholic, sober by the grace of God, 21 or 22 years at that time. And I could have done a V8 commercial on my forehead because I was shocked that I had been so narrow-minded and judgmental to this human being. And I decided, okay, it's time to listen. I'll hear her story. And you know what happened? She did talk about losing a loved one. Her son was in sobriety for 10 years. He had devoted his life to helping other human beings with alcohol-related issues. Her entire family is involved in helping people in recovery. They work at various treatment centers. A couple of them are in law enforcement, and their goal is to really help people. And when her son, Mark, was killed in St. Paul, hit head-on by a drunk driver on Highway 94, how does that even happen? Somebody's going the wrong way down the freeway, and it wasn't Mark. The alcohol-impaired driver that hit Mark was not an alcoholic, but alcohol doesn't care because alcohol doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care if you're an alcoholic or not. It doesn't care anything about you. But if you have alcohol in your system, you can make an alcohol-impaired decision, and the more you drink, the more impaired you are, and the less you can reason and perform, and you have a disease of perception if you're an alcoholic, and the perception gets out of control until your life gets out of control, and then stuff happens. Well, this guy didn't have that picture in his life. He had just graduated from college, attended a kegger, had a good time that night. He quit drinking at 1 in the morning. He did not get back out on the road until about 5:15. 15 minutes later, he collided head-on with Mark on 94 near Mounds Boulevard. If you happen to know where that long bend is, near Mounds on 94. They collided head on. Mark was on his way back from the airport and was killed instantly. Now, the thing that drove an arrow of sorrow and compassion and love into my heart when I heard her story was the part that she described of herself in the courtroom on the day of sentencing for the young man who killed her son. She was standing on one side of the courtroom, as is required in a court of law. They separate the offenders and the victims. They have a invisible line in the center of the courtroom, right? You know, it's the adversarial system. No one is supposed to cross this metaphorical or this literal line. And if you do that, you might end up contaminating the case. If the offender hears something or something goes into the judge's ears that contaminates the judge's ability to be rational and objective, it can be argued on appeal that the case needed to be thrown out because the judgment wasn't rendered in a way that is fair and consummate toward what the law asks for. And then if the offender says anything, crosses that metaphorical line, of course, you know it's a lot easier with them. What you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. So everyone in that courtroom is really pretty much muted because you might screw up the case. And they've stripped the humanity from our courtrooms through the adversarial system in its misapplication of justice. The idea is great, the practice isn't working out so good. So restorative justice comes along. And they try to bring some true justice into the courtroom where they have healing circles and they bring offenders and victims together and try to come up with a proper sentence, and everyone gets heard. Everyone's voice is heard, both sides, with no one being mean or rude to the other side. And they try to come up with some decision. And a modicum of a restorative justice healing circle transpires at the time of sentencing in the form of a victim impact statement. Both the victim gets to state something and the offender gets to state something, and however it impacted their life. The offender can say this is what led up to it, and the victim can say this is how this crime impacted me, and that's what it looks like, and then the judge sentences. This day, Mary Jo stood behind her lectern and asked the young man who killed her son to look at her, look her in the eyes. And he didn't want to do it. He was looking at the floor of that courtroom. And she asked him a second time, would you please look at me? And he kept looking at the floor. And you know what? I don't think he did that because he is a mean person. I think he just couldn't bring himself to do it. And she broke a rule. She got out from behind her lectern and she started crossing this courtroom. And she got to that center line and she crossed it, and the judge watched her and didn't prevent her. He had had numerous conversations with her, knowing what she was about. She wasn't going over there to harm this person. But his mom, who was in the front of the courtroom to support him, didn't know that. And as Mary Jo was walking past her, their eyes touched, and his mom was giving her the look like, don't you hurt my son. He knows what he's done. He doesn't need more because of you. And that wasn't what she was trying to do. She's a mom. She understood what she was feeling. But she approached the young man that killed her son and asked him again if he would look her in the eyes when she gives her victim impact statement, and he still couldn't do it. And she wanted him to see her eyes because she said the eyes are the windows to the soul. So she reached out her hand, placing her hand beneath his chin, gently asked him again if he would look her in the eyes. This time he allowed it, and she raised up his face. And as soon as their eyes touched, she said, I want you to know something. I want you to know that I love you and I forgive you for killing my son. What do you think happened at that point with him? What was his reaction? Cried? Yeah. He had holy water jetting out of his face, man. He broke down sobbing. And when he started crying like that, she stepped behind his lectern and she put her arms around him and held him as he cried in her arms uncontrollably. And she just kept repeating the words, I love you, I forgive you, I love you, and I forgive you. It's not what he expected to hear, and me as a listener that evening, when Mary Jo talked to our group, it's not what I expected to hear. It might not have been what you expected to hear, but her life became intertwined with mine, and her story impacted me in such a way that it shifted the way I looked at things. I didn't know that a mother could forgive someone for killing their child. And she loved her child, Mark. Loved him desperately. But she said, look, she said, 1, I'm a Christian, and 2, I'm in recovery, and both teach forgiveness. And by the way, I am not pushing Christianity or recovery. Anybody can forgive. You can be an atheist, a Muslim, a Buddhist, and none of the above. We're all humans. We can forgive each other. We can love each other. That is universal. For me, love is my religion. Action is my gospel, if you will. And I'm trying to follow the feather of peacefulness, and Mary Jo's story was that. It brought me a peace that I didn't expect. But she said when someone wants to get well, or when we need to help them get well, nobody has a right to be an obstacle or a barrier to that person getting well. Which means that I don't have a right to stand here and make you feel a pain that brings you down. Got to hang up the blame thrower. I'm not mad at anybody. We got to quit being mad at each other, frankly. I wish we could just change the name MADD into something else, but you know, it's catchy and that's what they say, and it's been that way for a long time. But until we can clear the debris of unforgiveness from our lives, it's going to be really hard to love each other. And that's the only way out of drinking and driving is love. So it's an imperative that we act loving on every side of the situation. But it's a hard pitch for many to accept. And I get that. But Mary Jo gave me my 5-year medallion in the company of a dumpster, and I was quite happy to get it. And there we were sitting at a table in Joseph's restaurant in Stillwater. It was after we were speaking for MADD one Christmas. I want to introduce you to somebody. This is little Timmy Wilburn. He was a 6-month-old little boy when he was killed by an alcohol-impaired driver. The driver was not drunk. He had 3.5 beers. He made an alcohol-impaired decision and killed little Timmy. Now, chances are every person in this room made an alcohol or a drug-impaired decision or both to get here. It's one of the admission prices for being here. Chances are, maybe there's a few that got shanghaied. I get that. But you're here for a reason, and you're here for the reason you say you are here, not for the reason anyone else says you're here. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. I'm in charge of what I say, you're in charge of what you hear. Take your power back. Don't let anything bother you or make you angry or at all. The universe is conspiring to give you the best life possible, and it's true right now just like it was yesterday and just like it will be tomorrow. But imagine the person that killed this child being able to say something like that. He was 20 years old when he killed him. He didn't mean to do it, but he also didn't mean not to do it. But let me ask you this. If it would have been you who drove under the influence and killed a child or someone, rather than living with the idea that you've actually killed someone, rather than getting a deed of, do you think it's possible, just possible, that you wouldn't want to live with the idea that you've killed someone? It might be true that suicide might cross your mind. You couldn't live in your own skin. Any hands willing to go up on that one? a few of us for sure. And I think that would be a thing that would be hard to live with. Let's flip that coin. If someone would have killed your child, would homicide cross your mind? Any hands? So I'm seeing some of the same hands, a couple that aren't the same hands. So we are talking about life or death, but imagine trying to live with this. Imagine being the person that killed Mark. Imagine being this woman by the name of Penny that I met in MADD, who killed her own child of 6 months of age. She was driving home from the bar. Her child was in the seat, strapped in properly and everything. She made an alcohol-impaired decision, and it wasn't Timmy, by the way. And she got into a crash, and her own child died. The #1 killer of children in this country who die of drunk driving tragedies are killed by the ones that love them the most, the ones that have the most access to them, and that is, of course, the parent. The parent are the #1 killers. Now you would think that that concept, that truth, that reality would fly in the face of everything I said in terms of love. It's like if you love someone, you won't hurt them, and if you love yourself, you won't hurt yourself. Oh my God, kids are dying. People are dying. We're jeopardizing the ones that we love the most. How can that be? So love itself doesn't go far enough. It's the consciousness of love that does. To remain conscious and to have vigilance for love is a requirement to keep that love alive. Back in my drinking days, I'd have cactus that would die of thirst. I couldn't keep a relationship alive, much less a cactus, man. I was too busy partying. Come back home one day and wake up and find out that my plants ain't had something to drink in a long time. Well, relationships are the same way. And I've seen people in the 27 years I've been in MADD who have told me, I'll never be back. I'll never come to another MADD panel. I get it. I got it. And it's never going to happen again. But they say that the recidivism rate is pretty high. Someone even told me 41% will come back again with a DWI. It's like, what? No, really? And why that happens, I think, isn't because somebody's bad. It's because there's an issue that has been unresolved, or the consciousness of love has evaporated from their minds and their hearts. They love as they love, but they didn't remember. So how do you keep that idea alive? I mean, people that promise to be married for the rest of their lives, even that dies because they didn't feed the marriage. And sometimes the marriage dies. Sometimes it dies and everyone did everything right. It just happens. I get that, But when you don't feed it, it dies. Everything does. If you don't feed your education, you forget the things that you learned in college. You might retain a certain amount, but you need to keep the ideas flowing. It's like with the human brain, neurons that fire together wire together. If you know anything about how the brain, the anatomy of the brain works, you learn something new, the neurons connect, and if you keep addressing those same neurons and keep practicing that same information, that pathway gets thicker, and if that gets really important, you can actually eventually create a neural network. Not just a neural pathway, which is part of a network. You can create a brand new network if it's life-changing, if you hold on to an important decision, and then everything slowly builds around it, like your entire life slowly builds around your marriage, or slowly builds around the idea that you said you're never going to do this again. Like when I sobered up, said I'm not going to drink again. Ain't going to happen. And I built my life around that idea, and I kept that idea alive because it's good for me. Recovery is good for me. It's not because I'm a bad person or I have some weakness. There's nothing immoral about being in recovery. It's not a weakness. First, life throws a pebble, and then life throws a brick. Anyone ever operated the self-ass-kicking machine? You can label all those different things, different words, and one of those labels for me would be abuse as a child. And I kept running that machine and hurting myself at the idea that someone was that ruthless and cruel to me as a child. When I was taken away from my parents as a child, they said that me and my brother endured abuse worse than they'd ever seen in the entire state of Minnesota. It's not that way now. It's not as uncommon now. But it was very uncommon then. And then I went to a bunch of different foster homes, group home, orphanage, etc. There was a lot of abuse just growing up. By the time I was 18, I was a piece of work. And, pardon me? Someone asked something? Okay. So, all the self-ass-kicking machine stuff that I was operating, I became my own worst enemy. And they say in recovery that we didn't have a drinking problem. We had a thinking problem, and that drinking was a symptom. And if you don't do something about the symptom, you can't get to the root cause of why you're drinking in the first place. And when a person is in pain, sometimes they want to forget their pain through drinking or drugging. And that's something I had chosen to do. And I ended up in treatment at a young age, and I ran away from treatment, and I wasn't going to trust anybody to help me turn my life around. Because I thought if I trusted people, that meant I would get abused, I would get hurt. Trust meant betrayal. It meant pain. It meant people are going to, even when I was a kid, and I tried to share with a psychologist some of the things that had happened to me, psychologist abused me in his office. You don't get trust out of situations like that, And so I grew up without any trust. I'm not trusting anyone in this treatment environment, right? So I run away from treatment. And the judge was just trying to help me. So there's a lot of things that led up to this child dying because I was the one who did it. The pictures of little Timmy that I showed you, I was the one that killed him. I was 20 years old. I was in a hot car. The hot car didn't make me do it. I was under the influence. I tried to avoid hitting two women crossing the street. I did not see that one of those two women was pushing a baby stroller. I was sitting low in the seat. And I came around the corner. I made an alcohol-impaired decision. I tried to avoid hitting them. I turned the wheel to the left, trying to drive behind where they were in the middle of the street. And the car fishtailed, and now it's sliding down the street sideways, shaking the car violently as it was sliding. And I knew I was taking up the whole street, and I thought, oh my God, I've got to turn if I could at least straighten the car out, I won't be taking up the whole street. And I don't know how I did it so quick, but I got the car straightened out. I got my foot buried on the brake, and these two women are pretty close to the front of my car, and I had just enough time to say, God, please don't let me hit them. One woman ran to safety, which is the woman in the lower left-hand corner. Her name is Susan, holding little Timmy. But the woman above, holding Timmy by the tree, is his mom, Sherry. She didn't get out of the way. In the upper right-hand corner is Sherry and Timmy and Robert, the father. And Christmas, or birthday, I don't know what it was. She told me, now I can't remember. That's a picture that Sherry sent me of little Timmy and herself. And then MADD made a quilt for me. They asked me what I wanted it to say. I said just his name, the date of the death, and little Timmy is looking down from heaven. Those in heaven see the heart, see mine. And there's where I ended up over that. I got a manslaughter charge. Did 5 years, 10 months, and 1 day in the Missouri State Penitentiary for Men at Jefferson City. I pled guilty to the charge of manslaughter because I saw the photographs of the stroller with blood on it. And I was in jail for about 10 months before I saw those photographs. I was pleading not guilty. I couldn't believe this really happened in my life. This can't be true. I'm going to wake up and it's just been a horrible nightmare. And then my lawyer, at our last continuance, he said, I don't know how you can keep saying you don't think this really happened, like everyone is just lying. But here's the evidence. The state has decided to relinquish some of the photographs for you to view. And he took out his briefcase, set it on the desk in the courtroom, opened his briefcase, pulled out a stack of Polaroids with rubber bands around it, pulled out the rubber bands and slid that stack over to me. And I looked at the first photograph, don't remember what it was, set it down, looked at the second photograph, don't remember what that was, and I set it down, and the third photograph is where I stopped, because it was the baby stroller laying on the asphalt where it came to rest. It was crunched up into an oblong shape, like a distorted egg-shaped thing, just laying there, covered with blood. The armature that used to hold the stroller, push the stroller, you know, the U-shaped elongated piece of aluminum that you push the stroller with, was ripped in half at the top and was now pointed in opposite directions. And the police had spray painted a line around the bulkhead of the carriage there, and big yellow fat police line. And I'm not a psychologist, I can't explain this, but when I saw that photograph, it was as if I was looking into an oven that's on the self-clean mode, and it's on the hottest point, and it's just red. That's what that photograph looked like. It was red, and the light was refracting off the aluminum of the stroller through the little baby's blood, little Timmy's blood, which made that photograph look like it was baking, like it was on fire or something. And I could hear a sizzling sound on my frontal lobe, as if you removed my ear from the side of my head and placed it on the front of my forehead. And I could hear that sizzling sound as that template that I was looking at was just pressed against my frontal lobe. And it's not something you can easily forget. And I just pressed my hand over the stack of Polaroids and I slid them back over to my attorney and I said, let's get this over with, I'll plead guilty. I knew there was no way in hell that I was going to go through a trial to make the mother relive losing her son again in a court of law. I couldn't do it to her. And I didn't want to go to prison. They called this prison the bloodiest 47 acres in America at the time. There's some pictures of the joint. Lower left, B and C Hall. Underneath where I did about a year in SEG. Started a little gang when I was there, did some things I'm not proud of. There's A Hall, the honor dorm that I never got to see the inside of. Death House, upper right. B and C Hall, one of the newer halls. And it was just a picture of me. I think I was 22 in that photograph, and you could have some civvies in prison, but we'd have them sewn up in the garment factory, and then the cops, you know, they'd come around and take your stuff, and then you just go buy some more. And it was just a big game. Everyone played, right? But I had this shirt, you want to take my gun, come and get it. I was fighting everybody and everything. The night that they brought me to the jail after killing Timmy, I had hit the mother. She went up into the air, came back down on the ground. She told me that I ran over both of her legs. Then I ran over the stroller. I don't know how the police reconstructed this, but they said little Timmy was thrown free of the stroller without being run over by the tires. And the stroller itself disengaged the exhaust line and the muffler, which I thought was what I was hearing underneath the car. I didn't know it was a baby stroller. And then that entire carnage came out from behind the vehicle and came to rest in 3 different places: exhaust line, muffler, and baby stroller. And then I went around the corner and I pulled over into somebody's yard, knowing there's no way that I was going to run, right? because I'd actually hit someone. It never occurred to me that what I was doing could physically harm another human being. I knew I ticked off a lot of people by joyriding and taking their cars, you know, but I wasn't out to physically harm someone. And I waited around that corner outside of my car, just waiting for the police. It probably took them 15 minutes to get to my location. And I could hear all this noise around the corner, the sirens and commotion, and I was wondering why it was taking the police so long to get to me. And I didn't want to see it. You know, the reason I pulled over where I did is because I didn't want to see this woman down in pain and hit because of me and hurting. Didn't want to see it. And secondly, I was concerned for my own skin, that had someone saw the guy who had hit her and like there he is, they'd do something to me. I was scared for my own self. And but I waited for the police. You know, and earlier I said if someone would have hit someone you loved, would you think about offing them? Yeah, that's realistic. It's the first thing that occurs to us. But thing is, it shouldn't be the first thing that occurs to us afterwards. It should be the thing that occurs to us before we ever get behind the wheel of a car under the influence of alcohol. But I had a lot of history behind me that mutated my ability to have a normal life, and I wasn't doing anything about it. Nothing. If your life is not what you want it to be, you need to do something about it now before it's too late. That's one of the messages I want to care enough to tell you about. If your life, not what I want your life to be, what you want your life to be. It's all about taking your power back, you know, so you can have a good life, the best life possible. What we're saying here at MADD is for you. It's not to you. It's not to torment you. It's not to make your life difficult. It's to free you from ever having to do the things that we've had to do to try and figure out how we're going to stay alive. I mean, even victims think about suicide when they lose their husband or their wife, or they lose 3 children in one crash, you know? And how are they going to live through it? We don't wish that on you. And the sound that I heard underneath that vehicle of the stroller and stuff, that's not a sound I can relate in any way that you would really grasp it. It's just an intellectual endeavor. I could say, yeah, you're at a movie and you're watching a chase scene with the cops chasing the crooks, and they have the obligatory scene where the cars go up into the air and the chassis drag the asphalt and the sparks go flying and all the special effects that you hear and you see, you know, and the cop does the same thing as they're chasing them, you know, all special effects. And that low gravelly crunching sound that happens underneath those cars, that's what it sounds like. And the first time I saw a movie after I sobered up with that scene in it, it instantly brought me back to that time and that place. As where when you hear it, you just hear special effects, which is a good thing. Why? Because you still have your innocence. You have your innocence. And don't allow your innocence to make you a victim to say that you don't need to hear this stuff. Your innocence is to be treasured, to thank your higher power or whatever it is that you didn't have to go through the things for real. You're just hearing about it. You don't have to wonder how you're going to stay alive after killing someone. You don't have to wonder what it's like to be me. When I got out of prison the last time, you know, I've done 13 and a half years, 2 major incarcerations, several minor incarcerations. I was a slow learner. I kept coming back, you know, doing life in the installment plan. But this time when I got out with a real attitude. And I wanted to hurt guards and all kinds of stuff. And that was my secret plan, was to maybe join a violent organization, try and overthrow the United States government, or at least hurt people and do stuff. I was nowhere near ready to have a normal life, but I didn't want to be locked up anymore. And I remember the day before I got out of the joint, I'm looking at these guys and I'm thinking, man, if I got to come back here again, I'm going to put a piece of steel in somebody's chest that even looks at me sideways. That, or I am going to force them to murder me, but somebody's dying. because I can't do this anymore. I felt like my whole life was wasted. And I was in so much spiritual and emotional pain that I couldn't do this anymore. I was spiritually bankrupt. I felt worthless. I felt like I got nothing. But the only thing I had was my anger. And I had that big time. And they made me sign a document before they let me out saying, guess what? You don't get to drink. And if you drink, you go back to the slam. So I got out on a Friday, which they no longer do, by the way, because of people like me. I don't know, but they only let people go Monday through Thursday, so you have time to go visit your PO the day you actually get out. But I got out on a Friday, went out and partied on Saturday night without the intention to party. All I did was decide I was going to go to Carboni's, sit down and have one slice of pizza, have 1 3-2 beer. And I was going to prove to these people that I'm not one of these asshole anonymous people. That was the phrase I used in my head. And I didn't need any kind of that help, right? And the beer was good. You go without drinking beer for 4.5 years, 3-2 beer, it's actually really beer. And, when it went down my throat, felt the warmth go down my esophagus. It blossomed in my stomach, and you know the drill, man. You got veins in your stomach, and it absorbs the alcohol, and it takes, 15-20% of that goes straight into your bloodstream. Doesn't get to go through the liver yet, right? So you feel good pretty quick. And I just felt like I blossomed. It felt so good. I'm not trying to make you thirsty here or nothing, right? But that's how good it felt to me. And so I ordered a pitcher of beer, and then I saw a sign that said that they quit selling beer. I think it was 10 o'clock or something, maybe 11, I can't remember. So I ordered a second pitcher of beer. I got a pitcher and a half in front of me. I thought, what the hell, I'll order one more. Now I got 2.5 pitchers of beer in front of me. What am I going to sit here and drink all this beer? I sat down to get one, and I'm looking at this, and I got this vague feeling there's something wrong. There's something wrong with this pitcher. And then I thought a few words, really exciting words. I kind of went, where's the women? You know the feeling? You start feeling good and you want to go out and have some fun, go out dancing and have a good time. I hit every bar in Stillwater. Every bar in Stillwater. As if what? No guards drinking the bars in Stillwater? And I acted a fool in each and every one of those bars. I didn't miss a single bar. And I'm spending all of my gate fee on drinking, and I'm getting drunk. And I'm acting obnoxious, and I'm hitting on people's old ladies, and I'm old enough to still say old lady, and even once every couple of years I might still squeeze out the chick word, And, but I was at that place to where I was just letting my mouth overload my butt, and there was a miracle that happened that night. Nobody busted my head. No cops. No bouncers. No matter what I did. And I tried to throw away my freedom over and over and over. And I was obnoxious. And if some guys didn't like something, I said, hey, let's step out to the alley. We'll solve this little problem right now, just you and me. And you know how it is when a guy's drunk. Man, you can punk slap him, you fall right over. I'd be laying on the ground saying, come back here, I'll kick your ass, And I swear I was being protected that night. But I got mad when the bars closed in Stillwater, and I caught a cab over to Wisconsin because I ain't done yet. And I got mad when they closed over there, and then I got a cab back to my apartment in Stillwater. I was sicker than I'd ever been in my life. And I was puking, and I couldn't stop puking, and I got honest with myself for the first time in my life about drinking. I said, I'm an alcoholic, and I stopped drinking. And I just looked at the clock at 3:30 in the morning, and I said, I ain't ever doing this ever again. And I started going to meetings. I went to a therapist to deal with the issues from my childhood. I went to a meeting a day for 18 months. I met with my therapist as often as she wanted me to. And it took me a while to heal, and I only trusted women for a long time, And I wasn't dating because I needed to be in sobriety, and they say don't date for your first year. So I was strictly about my recovery, man. but I didn't trust men, you know, and when we'd do hugs in the program, you know, it's like if I'd hug a guy, I'd be like this. Make sure their hand can't do a reach around or something, you know. And because I had no trust, because I had been injured as a kid, you know, and that's where you come from when you're like that. And if you've been sexually abused, it contaminates the way you view life. It took me a while to be able to trust people again. And ultimately, it was really trusting myself to love my fellow human beings and to forgive. And Mary Jo, when she came and talked to us about forgiveness, that was the start of my journey. A MADD story helped shift my life. And I've forgiven the people that have harmed me in the past. And they might not care if we forgive. They might not even deserve it. Who cares? But we deserve peace, so we forgive. It's not about them. It's about us, taking our power back. Forgiveness has to run deeper than the offense that required the forgiveness. The forgiveness runs deeper than the offense, and the forgiveness never can exist without the offense. So it's more powerful than the offense. And I wouldn't trade it for nothing. But I'm not an alcoholic. Sorry, I'm not picking on cats. I'm a cat lover, by the way. But that's one of the pebbles, you know. First the universe throws a pebble, and then it throws a brick. Had lots of warning signs. You've only got one, probably. There's my date of sobriety. The woman that I fell in love with, her nickname was Tree. She went out, got me this medallion, and put my sober date on it. And then, ironically, she drank herself to death on December 8th of 2010. So I'm celebrating an anniversary of this woman who I desperately loved more than anything but God. And it was the toughest period of my life. The first 2.5 years after being hit with this stuff, wanted to kill myself all day, every day, but I had turned my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand God, and it wasn't my life to take. So I couldn't take myself off of planet Earth. And that was a tough hit, man. But I saw this in the recovery house where I sobered up, and it reminded me of a picture that my grandma had on top of the TV of me. And it said, I know I'm somebody because God don't make no junk. Works for me. And you can see God as G-O-D, good orderly direction, if you want. You know, it doesn't have to be a religious thing. I ain't going back to daycare. I'm done not loving myself. When I joined MADD, and I started speaking in January of '91, I did it reluctantly. Mary Jo asked me to come in. I didn't want to do it, and she said, look, you got to do it. When we're asked to do service work, we don't get to say no. And secondly, what if you help someone? It's basically saying, it's not all about you. What about other human beings that might need to hear this story? And I said, well, I get that, but I just don't know if I can do it. So I showed up to a panel in December, and I started speaking in January because I saw that the writing was on the wall. I felt like I was supposed to be doing it, but what I didn't know was going to happen is that I wanted to kill myself after speaking. Reliving the feelings and having nowhere to hide. I couldn't bury my pain in a bottle or in a joint or in a drug anymore. I had to feel everything. And it's like you had stripped my skin off and just poured salt on it, and every little feeling was so powerful and so harsh. I didn't know what to do with it. I'd never gone and felt all of my feelings before, and now I had to face all that. And while I was speaking, you know, I felt like I'm doing some good, you know, MADD people are supportive. People are generally friendly, you know, and I get all that, but when I drive home alone, it's one of the hardest things I've done in my life. One of the hardest things is to not press my foot on the accelerator and get up to 100 miles an hour and crash into a bridge or a tree, to kill myself, to prove to you people how sorry I was for what I've done. And that's how sorry I was, and I don't know how I kept from doing that, but it's one of the hardest things I've ever done, is to stay alive. And I finally told Mary Jo, I said, Mary Jo, I don't think I can keep speaking for MADD. This is killing me. And she said, you know, when somebody is suffering from low self-esteem, they might get those feelings, but when a regular speaker in MADD talks, they don't go, I'm going to kill myself. She said, you're suffering from low self-esteem, and I got a plan for you. Do some mirror therapy. Anyone know what that is? She said, this is what I need you to do. Look into the mirror every day. Point at yourself. Look yourself in the eyes. Say your name and say, Timothy, I love you. And do that every day until you mean it. And I honestly thought it sounded ridiculous. But I respected her, and I decided to try it. So the next morning, I looked in the mirror and I said exactly what she told me to say. I looked in my own eyes, said my name, and I said, Timothy, I love you. And then I spent maybe 30 seconds or more, I don't know how long, I didn't time it, spewing expletives about how I hated myself. You're a scumbag, you're a dirtbag, how could you have killed this kid? You must be worthless, no one's ever going to love you, you know. And the tape was playing out. There must be something wrong with me, because if there wasn't something wrong with me, these people wouldn't have hurt me when I was a kid, and all this stuff, you know. I'm worthless. And I think maybe sometimes when women get raped and they feel like they're worthless, and how can they trust a man again, and stuff like that. You know, we get injured and we have this hard stuff, but we can't believe this shit. We can't believe that's a lie straight out of hell. It's not our fault. It's not our fault. We need more love, not let's give up on life shit anymore, you know. But trying to live in my own skin after all the shit that happened in my life, and Mary Jo nailed it. I had low self-esteem. I was walking with the enemy, and the enemy was me. So every day I looked in the mirror and I said, Timothy, I love you, for 8 years. That's how long it took before I finally meant it. I rarely missed a morning. And the day that I looked in the mirror and I said, Timothy, I love you, and I meant it, I was shocked. I didn't know if the day would ever come. And when I had to look closer, man, I got like up in the mirror like this, you know, and I leaned in and I'm looking for the ex-convict. I'm looking for the hater. I used to be a racist. I used to be all this stuff. I couldn't see him anymore. He's gone. Where'd he go at? He disappeared. I just saw this peacefulness and this spiritual light around my face as like a buffering white light. And it was hard to believe, but guess what happened when I saw this changed human being? I got all happy and shit, you know? It's not like I got 100% happy all day, every day for the rest of my life, but no. And I run down to the recovery place to share my happiness, right? With the people that I'm doing these meetings with, and I bum rush them, and there's this little pavilion in front of the clubhouse. And I ran to the middle of the pavilion, and I said, check out this shit, man. You guys are going to love this shit. They all stopped, you know, like, holding their cigarettes, looking at me like, damn, what's wrong with dude? All right, I'm listening. And I said, this morning I looked in the mirror and I said, Timothy, I love you, and I meant it. I meant it. And this one chick took a hit off of her cigarette. I'd known her for, I said it, a chick. I set it up. I'd known her for a year or two. She's in recovery, right? Nice person. Took a big old hit off of her cigarette, blew a big old plume of smoke in the air and said, what? You gonna kiss yourself too? No, I wasn't going to kiss myself too. It was not an exercise in narcissism. It was 8 years of hell that finally ended. And I could speak for MADD and not want to kill myself anymore. That's a big deal. I could look at myself in the mirror and not hate myself anymore. And if you can love yourself, it's really hard to hate anyone else. There was a poem I discovered in prison titled The More Loving One, written by W.H. Auden, and this poem changed my life. And he wrote, looking up at the stars, I know quite well that for all they care, I can go to hell. But on earth, indifference is the least we have to dread from man or beast. How should we like it were stars to burn with a passion for us we couldn't return? If equal affection cannot be, let the more loving one be me. Admirer as I think I am of stars that do not give a damn, I cannot. Now I see them say, I missed one terribly all day. And were all the stars to disappear or die, I should learn to look at an empty sky and feel its total dark sublime, though this might take me a little time. 8 years. And I'm trying to shortcut yours so you don't have to wait 8 years. I got a little assignment for you, and then I'm done, and Mary is okay with questions. We can open it up. She's in charge of the show here, but here's the assignment. Mary Jo gave me an assignment of mirror therapy. This one, obviously you don't have to do anything you don't want to do, but if you do this, it's going to change your life. I guarantee it. If you don't tell at least 3 people a day that you love them, you've probably wasted a day of your life. So for 1 year, every day, not looking in the mirror and saying, I love you, unless you have to be one of those 3 people, fine. But every day, tell 3 people a day that you love them. And don't always make it the easy ones, like your family members, people you see every day, someone you see. How about telling someone that doesn't look like you that you love them? That doesn't sound like you. That doesn't whatever like you, you know. There are people in our world right now that I suspect have never had anyone tell them that they love them, unless it's someone that looked like them. You know, so let's not do it the easy way. Let's do it the hard way sometimes. Not all the time. It doesn't have to be painful. But if you do that every day, you're finally going to run into somebody who is ready to give up. And you're going to tell them that you love them. And they might not have heard that in a long time, maybe never. And if you know anything about the statistics of suicide, people frickin' give up every day. And if you're telling 3 people a day that you love them, it's a matter of time before you run into one of those people. You might even run into a couple within the first 365 days of practicing this. But you will change your life, and you might change somebody else's. You know, the definition of a friend is someone who takes the time to learn your song, so when you forget it, they can come back and sing it to you. We forget who we are. People loved me as I was until I could love myself. It took a lot of work. I was quite damaged. But people loved me and they cared about me. And I think we've got, how many people we got today? 70? I don't know. 100? I don't know. Sorry, I went to a public school in this country. I don't know. And they teach good in public schools. It's just a joke I like. But so I am going to tell 120 people right now that I love you, and that doesn't give me a license to not say it for the next month. So, you know, but if you haven't heard it today, you've heard it now. So when you go home, give someone a hug, tell them you love them, and then find somebody that maybe needs to hear it. Let's change this world. Let's take all the ugliness out and replace it with love. We can do it. It's possible. The only reason that we don't stop drunk driving today is because people don't believe it. They don't believe it's possible. There's countries where it's non-existent. It is possible, but we don't believe it in this country. That's the problem. We don't believe in love. Well, we got to start believing it. Be the more loving one and watch what happens. And you'll one day look in the mirror and say, oh my God, my nature has changed. I'm more of a loving person than I ever dreamed possible. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. And if you tried that and it doesn't work, at the end of a year, you go ahead and write MADD and just say, hey, tell that moron to quit telling that love story, okay? But this message is about love. It's not about condemnation or trying to make you walk out of here feeling bad, you know? It's all about love. So I love you. Peace out. Okay. All right.